Nice job, boys.
And one more thing, with that, we turn it over to Captain Zarnecki, who is going to explain the law enforcement oath of honor.
Bob, unfortunately, you're going to have to come stand out in front here again. I'm sorry. For those of you who have been here for a few of these, you know what I'm going to say. For those of you who haven't, the Port Washington Police Department is an accredited oath of honor agency. All employees from the chief of police to our clerical staff have taken and signed the oath of honor to signify our belief in its words and importance. The oath of honor for the Port Washington officers is as follows. Please repeat after me. On my honor, I will never betray my badge,
On my honor, I will never betray my badge,
my integrity, my character, or the public trust.
my integrity, my character, and public trust.
I will always have the courage to hold myself
I will always have the courage to hold myself
and others accountable for our actions.
and others accountable for our actions.
I will always uphold the Constitution,
I will always uphold the Constitution,
my community, and the agency that I serve.
my community, and the agency I serve.
Congratulations. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you do have to sign that. Lost a badge already.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's hard to put a pin through steel, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Officer Ruth, welcome back to Port Washington. We're very grateful that you've landed back here in Port Washington. It's always cool for us to have a pirate come back home and know not just our community, but the members and our values. And we appreciate that, as well as the oath that you just swore to us as a community that you will keep us safe. And we're very grateful for that. And to your family and boys, we appreciate that your dad will be out there making sure that we're safe, just like he does for you every single time he's with you. So we're really grateful for that. And before the police department goes, January 9th was Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. We did not have a council meeting, so I could get you a proclamation in advance. But this year, I'd like to be able to hand it to one person as we head out the door. But January 9th was National Law Enforcement Day. And again, the citizens of Port Washington are grateful, gentlemen, for everything that you do, men and ladies, men and women on the police department, for everything that you do to ensure us the last few days, especially when it's been so cold. And you've been helping out all those Tesla drivers, so we appreciate that. But at the end of the day, we have a trusted police force. We are very blessed to have a community-based police force, and under the leadership of the executive team as well as all of the officers, we are very fortunate in the city of Port Washington to be a community that shines because of our safety and your reputation for being fair and diligent, but living the mission of protect and serve. So Captain Daigle, I want to hand this to you. And congratulate you on your retirement, and thank you for all of your years of service. It was your choice to come. Yeah, well, no, you're undercover trying to catch people serving minors, right? Thank you, Mr. Yeah, well, hey, congratulations, and thank you for your service to Port Washington.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so that brings us into the agenda. Mr. Ruth, hopefully someplace, somewhere, there's some cake for you and your family. But we're going to get started here on our meeting. So under the consent agenda, I'd be looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved and second. Any questions or concerns on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? None. All right. So moving into the mayor's business, we've already done the proclamation for National Law Enforcement Day. Just two updates. Just please remember, council, to look for the factual information guides that you're getting on the referendum. That comes up this spring in April. And look forward to just the opportunities that we'll have with the fire department as well as our community in the coming months to make sure they're informed as to the different ways in which that referendum could potentially support our safety as we move forward. And then the other piece is just a reminder to the community that our city administrator search is well underway. We are looking at finalists here in the next few days, and we'll be interviewing here before the end of January, and hopefully being in a position to announce a candidate at the beginning of February. So it's getting a little lonely here, although I don't mind looking at Mr. Gasper. It would be nicer if there was somebody sitting there. And with that, That's all I have under mayor's business. Under officer, staff, and reports, I don't know if anyone has any questions for staff. I do, again, want to encourage the city to use all of the amazing information in these staff reports to ensure that the community understands our dedication from the city. And there's just a couple of shout outs in here that I thought were pretty awesome. First, Susan, congratulations on your University of Wisconsin Green Bay Masters Academy onboarding certification, all the different pieces you went through. That was very cool. Yeah, especially the government use of artificial intelligence. Seems like an oxymoron. Rob, I want to wish you good luck on the additional grant funding for Valley Creek. I saw that in here. That additional $500,000 on top of the $915,000 would be really transformational to the city. And then if you could also pass along to John Crane, our superintendent, the Birchwood that's coming together. I went up there hiking the other day. It is beautiful if you've not gotten a chance to hit those trails. And congratulations to the Marina on the Elite Fleet Award. I'm not sure what that means, but we've got an elite fleet in Port Washington. Any other questions or comments on the officer reports? Okay, then we'll go to public comments and appearances. If there's anyone here who'd like to speak to us as a council, please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if you'd ever want more time, to contact myself to potentially have an agenda item placed on the agenda. Any public comments or appearances? Any public comments or appearances? It's too bad Officer Ruth's boys aren't here anymore because we would have them go up there, but. All right, seeing none, we're going to move into our agenda from standing council committees. Under number A there is the consideration of possible action on a software service agreement for, consideration of possible action on original Class B liquor and Class B beer license for Inventors Pub LLC. Washington Street, Cameron Huck is the agent. I'm going to turn that over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Mayor Knightsky. This, obviously, the Inventors Brew Pub is completing their project. They're anticipating being able to brew in the early spring. So as part of that permitting process, state and federally, for his brewer license, he needs to hold a Class B combination license at that time. His permit at the state level is being reviewed or beginning to be reviewed at this time with the understanding that this piece is going to be coming. So once this is approved by council, this license will be created and I will hold this until he proceeds to that next step. He currently has a license, obviously, at his other location on Lake Street. The intent is within the next 3 months, he will be able to then surrender that license to obtain this license from us to continue operations at the new Washington Street location. So once that's completed, that transaction with me, and he's able to set up his bar area and his accounts, he will be ready to operate when he's ready to do a soft opening and then a full opening. We will have then that quota license back in the pool.
Okay, any questions or concerns on the recommendation? Jonathan, or
will-
Mr. Pleitner?
Yep. I will move to approve the original Class B liquor and Class B beer license for Inventors Brew Pub LLC.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any questions or concerns? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, the next agenda item is consideration and possible action on a software service agreement with BSA for a new financial management program. The issue is, should the council approve the selection of BSNA as our new financial software vendor? And the staff recommendation is to approve the selection of BSNA as the city's new software vendor. Mark Manuelson.
Yes.
Wow, I looked up and you were there. That was. I didn't see you move over, sorry.
I'm elusive.
It's the little
I'm not
things in life
invisible,
that get
though.
me excited.
Well, the beginning of this was when the council allocated some of the ARPA funding that the city received about 18 months ago. Part of that was for the implementation of a new city software program, financial software management program. The timetable for that led us to issue a RFP this spring and summer We received a number of respondents. We outlined those in the memo. We had 4 total respondents, 2 of which we invited in to do a 4-hour or so full product demonstration. That was BSNA and Civic Systems, which is our current software provider. Based on those proposals and the product demonstrations, Emily and myself believe that moving forward with BSNA would be the best fit for the organization. Number of advantages with the BSNA system. It's a fresher system, a little better interfaces for staff and the casual users. It has some additional capabilities that are not available with the Civic Systems. And a significant portion of that discussion has also involved the ease of use with the payroll and human resource platform, as we have a very small staff for that. That needs to be able to be done as efficiently as possible. So with that said, that was where we ended up at the end of the day, and we believe that that would be a good start moving forward for the community.
Excellent. Thank you. That was the one question I had was, does it work in parallel with Paylocity? And the answer is yes.
So we would be moving payroll and HR back to integrate with the accounting system, and Paylocity would go away.
Oh, you would? Okay. Goodbye, little app.
I know.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Pleitner?
Move to approve the selection of BSNA as the city's new financial software vendor, pending city attorney review.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Moved in second. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, the next agenda item is consideration and possible action on a proposal for professional services, lead service line inventory and replacement plan by CDM Smith City Water. The issue is, should the city council approve a contract with CDM Smith Water for the development of a lead service line inventory and replacement plan, and the staff recommendation is to approve phase 1 of the CDM Smith City Water proposal for professional service, which includes task 1, not to exceed $38,500, and task 2, not to exceed $83,500. The staff recommends reallocating $75,000 from the current CIP currently dedicated for the master planning. Master planning will be postponed to the 2025 CIP. And the remaining $47,000 will be paid by the operating budget outside service employed. Dan. Rob.
All right, I'll quick introduce it, and then Dan can take over. But this has gone in front of the Board of Public Works and the GGF, General Government and Finance Committee. And what you stated, Mayor, was all correct, with the twist at Finance tonight. We are going to move ahead with all of the charges going to outside services employed, which will then put that line item over, but we will not be using, again, the $75,000 that was allocated in the CIP. So the accounting will be a little bit different, but the numbers will remain the same. And again, this is recommended for approval. And what this is as Dan can go over, is lead service line inventory and replacement plan. We're recommending that the city hire CDM Smith, working with City Water, and Matt Bednarski is here from CDM Smith, and Tom Nenig from City Water couldn't be here this evening, but they'll would team up to put these two plans together. And the first deliverable would be a report on September 3rd of this year at the Common Council on the status of these two plans. I'll turn it over to Dan.
So the first part of this is task 1 is completing our service line inventory on both the public and private side. That plan is due to the DNR on October 16th in 2024. We kind of have some chips in play already. We have our GIS system that has been built to house this inventory. The inventory is going to be like a working document, so essentially we're going to update it as things change. So what we're turning into the DNR is what they're going to request right away, but we're going to use this tool moving forward to keep our information correct. So really, we need City Water to come in and essentially just help us get to the finish line. It's going to require hundreds of hours of staff time that we just don't have to go through all of our records, our files that we have, here in the city, but also they're going to use their knowledge and their past experiences to formulate this spreadsheet that is due to the DNR. There's some tricks of the trade that they're going to know on how to, gather the information that we can't find here on our own. So as far as the inventory goes, that they're basically saying that they can get this done within 2 months, well ahead of the October timeline. There might be some field work that might hamper that timeline. We might need to get into people's homes to literally identify what kind of services are out there. But moving forward, we need to narrow that down, to find out how many exactly we need to start looking into. So that's task one of the inventory. Task two is coming up with a plan for the city. So as a city, what do we want to do? How do we want to pay for our replacements, whether that's helping customers out, finding obviously as many funding sources as we can. We basically need to create our own plan, as part of this, and that is mandatory and that is due to the DNR as well. So CDM Smith has worked with multiple communities, and they've I believe you were one of the first ones to actually do this. So they know what they're doing. They're going to put Port's best interest in line. We're going to talk as a group to kind of figure out how we're going to put this together. Any questions?
No, I think we all appreciate the efficiency that this brings and the speed of which that we'll hopefully be able to support that lead lateral going away throughout the city.
Yes.
And hopefully someday we'll never find out that plastic needs to go away as well. But thank you for this. Appreciate the diligence. Mr. Benning?
I think Dan alluded to that, but this is going to require going into homes and putting eyes on things. So I think the thing I'd ask, and Chris maybe put this in paper, but we need cooperation from our citizens to come in and be able to identify the type of material that makes up that water line coming in there. And in the finance meeting, I did ask them to put this on the September 3rd council agenda so that we can review that report at that time. This is something that we've talked about a year ago or so, Rob, when we first got the DNR grant, and we still don't know how big that bread box is, if it's this big or this big, and so I'm anxious to see how big it is. But I think as much knowing what the funding and the timeline is going to be, what's the cost to the city, what's the cost to the citizens to replace those laterals that are at risk. So I want to make sure we are holding ourselves and them accountable to getting that back to us in a timely manner. So with that, I'll recommend approval of this. I think the city attorney's got some review that needs to be done as well with that. So recommend review or approval with the city attorney's review and the presentation at September 3rd.
And I would make that second. I guess I want to make sure, Matt, can you talk a little bit too about that communication plan to make sure our citizens are aware what you guys can do for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me here tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to put this proposal in front of the council here. Again, Matt Bednarski with CDM Smith. And there are some, I guess, major components of the lead service line replacement plan itself. But one of those major components is a communications and public outreach strategy. And so what we would do, we've done this in a number of communities all throughout the country and throughout Wisconsin. What we would do is kind of take some of the previous communications that we've seen that's worked in various communities, but we'd bring it to Dan and Rob and perhaps a small committee of stakeholders that Port Washington would like to see review this, and just make sure that we're using effective communication to to your community. It could be written communication, it could be verbal. We have some videos that we've shared with communities that you can post directly to your website. There are some activities that we're going to ask your citizens to do as far as helping us identify the service material for their service lines. And in some cases, there are some citizens that may need to help us sample water and do some testing on that as well. So we're gonna use whatever communication strategy is most effective for the community, but we're gonna get input from you in order to be able to put that forward. And then if it needs to be revised, then it needs to be revised. Absolutely.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Any other questions for clarification? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we are going to battle lead. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, our next agenda item takes us from the Planning Commission. The subject is the ordinance 2024-1. This is an ordinance map rezoning land in the city of Port Washington and amending the official zoning map. The request is to rezone approximately 1.3 acres of land located on East Seven Hills Road, north of Park Knoll Lane, south of Interstate 43, and east of North Wisconsin Street, from a B2 local service center business to an RM4 multifamily residential. Port Grandview Development LLC and Tom Didier, PGD LLC, managing member, are the applicants, and this is a first reading tonight. The issue is, should the Common Council approve a petition to rezone the subject property from B2 business to RM4 multiple family residences? The staff has no recommendation at this time. This is a first reading only with no action. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And your kind of introduction to this matter at this point with the first reading kind of sums it all up. But in the meantime, if any here have questions or comments on the matter, I can take them now. Otherwise, we have a public hearing scheduled for February 6th, coincide with the second reading of the ordinance and possible Common Council action.
I guess as a standard order, were the adjacent residents, were they notified of this rezone request?
200-foot notices will be going out shortly. I hope not, for my sake.
Some guy sitting at the park and ride.
So the required 200-foot notices will be going out probably later this week, early next week. I like to have at least a 10-day heads up for those recipients of those notices. You don't want to go too far out, but not too far in, so they will be going out as required.
Mr. Sigwart?
Bob, could you, the Plan Commission recommended denying this zoning change. Could you elaborate on that just a bit, what their comments were?
I think the comments were largely given the limited...
Microphone, Bob.
By mistake. So the Plan Commission discussion centered on, at least with the denial, was the amount of, or lack thereof, of vacant commercial parcels in that area of town. And so I think my take was that those voting to deny the item wanted to reflect the current land use designation and preserve commercial property.
And also, I would add, I was there. I mean, one member also wanted it to not be RM4, but RM3 to match what was across the street. And the conversations had, I think, in the meantime, were really about like what is the potential and possibility of that property being next to a park and ride, and then the current landowners' exhausted attempts to attract some sort of a commercial or even a restaurant or some sort of a venue there that has not occurred. Yeah, Mr. Tierney.
Quick question, Bob. If we would go to the south of that, across from where like Piggly Wiggly is that area, that's still zone commercial, or is that?
Southwest, kind of.
Yeah, the area between Piggly Wiggly and the interstate.
Exactly. That parcel is for sale, I think commercial, and I think it's, the land use plan recommends, I think it's a mixed use designation, but certainly commercial or residential.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Planer, did you have something? Mr. Sigwart?
That parcel has been on the market for at least a decade, Bob, at least. I don't know how much longer than that. Maybe somebody knows, but I've often wondered why that wasn't popular. And if it was mixed use, it could have been residential. Didn't turn out to be residential. It could have been commercial. At one time, there was a Shell gas station with a car wash proposed there long ago. But
Is that the one that rezoned?
Mr. Ditter, did you want to speak as to kind of your efforts over the years to move that property and even kind of share with the council who you've approached if possible?
Yeah, good evening. I'm Tom Didier, one of the applicants that represents Port Grandview. I think the parcel you're referring to, Mr. Segwart, with the proposed gas station with the car wash, that's the one next to Century/Piggly Wiggly. And I believe that is the same zoning because over the last, as you said, 16 years, I have had numerous conversations with the listing agent of that property, which has changed probably 3 or 4 or 5 times. And we put our heads together and said, is there anything we can come up with to attract something? And without any success, but I believe it is the same zoning. It's a similar parcel, similar zoning. So, you know, it's an unusual parcel. My dad bought this way back in 2006, I believe. And I think the application we turned in talks a little bit about the proposal we had, and we had approval from the city to develop 3 freestanding office condominiums. Of course, the market changed right around then, and after 2006, 2007, there wasn't much market. Even though we had approval to do them, we didn't build them, thankfully, and we didn't really have any suitors, even though they were listed. So since then, since I think about 2008, we have had it for sale with the existing B3 zoning. We've reached out to a lot of people, not a lot of feedback. The feedback we get from people is that there just isn't a market for that sort of zoning right now. So we thought, given the recent housing crisis, by recent, I mean like the last 5 years with the lack of housing and the demand for housing, we thought this was well suited, given it's on I-43. I don't think the cars are gonna complain. It's next to the park and ride. That's a great location to have, you know, multiple housing units. It's by the bike path, it's close to shopping, it's close to the freeway entrance. It seems to fit all of the boxes for housing. So we thought, why not, you know, try and build some housing on here. As an example, and I don't have any paperwork with me, but, you know, our tax bill for this lot right now is $4.40. So there's no hardship here. We're not in any risk of not being able to afford it. We don't have a mortgage. We can afford the $4. The city's share is $1. I think the city's share is $1.80 every year that you guys get from the tax bill. If we were to build an apartment building, I believe the most recent apartment you guys have is the one on Spring Street. I think it's called Harbor Senior Spring City Apartments. And I think it's about 40 units. It's slightly bigger. I think that's 2 acres. Ours is 1.36. But that tax bill is about 45 grand a year, of which you guys get about $17,000. So we thought that might be, you know, lucrative to the city to have a parcel that could accommodate something similar without shaking things up, without having anybody complain about it. So that's kind of why we're here. If anybody has any, you know, particular questions about the property, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, and to Mr. Segwart's point, after our planning commission meeting, I went and looked up, and I looked at what McDonald's and Arby's pay in property taxes as well for a similar lot, and it's a fourth of what, you know, a dense development would be, and obviously it meets a need for us too. So, and if you talk to the Killian family and the owners of Arby's, they can't staff fast food in Port Washington. So it was a great conversation at Planning Commission, but, you know, it also set off a lot of, like, maybe we should ask some different questions than we started to. Mr. Pleitner?
He's done.
You're over there. Yeah. Paul?
Tom, is there any reason, I had the question from a constituent, why you couldn't do RM3 instead of RM4?
There isn't any reason other than RM4, I believe, allows us the most flexibility. Like with RM4, we could build RM2 or 3, and we're not this far to get into engineering. I have no idea how many units could potentially fit on there, but I know that, you know, if you get RM3 and you have 5 more units you want to get on there, RM4 allows for more units. So the only reason we have no objection to RM3. I don't think. We're not far enough along, and I'm not an engineer to know how parcels or how many units could fit on here. I'm assuming we would, you know, go use the height to get units stacked on top of each other. I have no idea if that's 2, 3 stories. I have no idea. Underground parking. We talked about potentially senior living there to, you know, with underground parking and an elevator, but we're not there yet. But the answer to your question is we are open to RM3. We asked for RM4 because it allows us the most flexibility. I don't believe the architectural standards are different. I think they're roughly the same, correct?
I believe so, but I think with the RM3, if we go across the street to the fourplexes that are there, it's a little bit different in design than what would be with a multi-building like the senior housing on the south end of town. That was a concern I had from a constituent.
Yep.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Mr. Harris, anything to add or any other questions from council to Bob or Mr. Didier? Okay, so this is a first reading only. There is no action on this. Tom, thank you for coming this evening. Bob, thanks for prepping that. All right. So next, under new business, we have a presentation and update on bluff stabilization designed by Miller Engineering and Scientists. The presentation for us this evening was prepared preliminary engineering drawings for bluff stabilization per the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program grant requirements. This update is being provided to the City Council. Staff recommendation is this is for information only. As we are beginning this presentation and conversation, I just wanted to share with the council, I had a really interesting meeting with the St. Lawrence Seaway Great Lakes group. It's something I think the city, we're going to explore joining because they work directly with the federal government around advocacy for Great Lakes communities with coastal management issues, specifically Clay Bluffs. And Wisconsin and some communities in Ohio, in different parts of the Great Lakes, have the same issue as well as the St. Lawrence Seaway. And they work with a few different engineering companies, and we're pretty excited to hear that we were doing this. So hopefully that will help get us some access to Rob's magic grant pen, and then we can keep moving forward. So Roger, are you introducing or are we just starting?
I'll just, I'll quick introduce it. As you already did, but so yes, Roger Miller and Emily Bloom are with us, and will give us an update on the work they've been doing on the stabilization of the bluff and the addition of a pathway down to the beach.
Excellent. All right, so again, I'm Emily Blum from Miller Engineers and Scientists. This is the next phase of the project for stabilizing the bluff along Upper Lake Park and North Beach. And this is the preliminary plan, the first out of 3 phases that we will be doing to create the final design. So this is a list of our scope of services. So the last time that we met, we did the schematic plan and had finished our initial research and provided a presentation about that. We are now on the preliminary plans and doing that presentation. These preliminary plans are based off of our schematic. Barring any substantial changes, we would continue onto the draft construction plans as well as finally to the construction-ready plans, which is the final document. This is the plan view of the park. So our project is outlined in red of where we would actually be doing work. So this project is split into 3 main categories. The first being directionally drilled subsurface drainage lines, which are located at the southernmost portion of the park. The second portion is mass grading, as well as a traversing pedestrian path. And the final aspect is a revetment and beach nourishment. So the first aspect of design being the subsurface drainage lines. We're planning on having 3 of those subsurface drainage lines, each of those being approximately 360 lineal feet in length. The bottom image shows a profile and cross-section of the typical piece of PVC pipe that will be used for this drainage line. So the upper and lower portions of the drainage line will be solid PVC, and within the location of the saturated silt and sand seam along the lower third of the bluff, there will be slotted PVC, which is what is shown here. So the blue lines indicating that we would have several sections of the pipe that have these slots in them. It would then be wrapped with a non-woven geotextile fabric to prevent sediment migration. And that would but then be within the zone of active seeping within the bluff face. So that directionally drilled subsurface drainage line would begin at the top of the bluff, and it would then discharge at the base, and it would be discharging within the revetment itself. This is the cross-section view, which again shows that we would be having the perforated section within the saturated zone, but being bracketed on the upper and lower portions by a solid PVC pipe. The beginning entry point would be substantially back from the top of the bluff on the southernmost pipe that would be located east of the road where it's located now, and the other two being located east of the proposed relocation of the road. This drainage line is placed. No, we're placing it east towards the lake. Yeah. So this subsurface drainage line is extending deep below the surface in order to capture the water further away from the surface of the bluff so that it's able to redirect more water, as well as preventing water from discharging on the bluff face. The second aspect being the mass grading and traversing path. The green highlighted area shows the approximate location of our preliminary plans of the traversing path. The path would be 6 feet wide, and it would be lined with limestone blocks along the interior of the path, so against the bluff face itself. As you can see, it's a switchback trail that traverses back and forth, and it would be at an 8% slope. We've also included several potential locations for quote-unquote bump outs, so locations where we can recess back a little bit with some limestone retaining walls, only a couple of feet tall, and then have a location where you can place benches or have resting locations as people go up and down the bluff. Again, these locations can really be placed anywhere, and these are preliminary spots. The traversing pathway would terminate at the southern corner of the North Beach, adjacent to the existing riprap revetment that is for the wastewater treatment plant. This is a cross-section of that work. So this is taken approximately midway throughout that traversing path, so you can see the 3 locations where we would have the pathway, as well as a cross-section detail of that path. So again, we have it 6 feet wide. It can be increased in width, but that does require more excavation. And we also have the French drains, which are located on the interior portion of the pathway to help with any surface water runoff, and that would also be discharged at the base of the bluff into the revetment. The last aspect being the revetment and beach nourishment. We have the revetment pretty small scaled, so that it's only located within the southern portion of this property and is highlighted in that cyan color. And then we also have the beach nourishment, which extends substantially farther because it is such a low portion of the cost. We can extend it further in order to provide some wave energy benefits for absorption of that. The cross-section of this revetment, so each of those stones would be, for the armor, would be approximately 3 feet in diameter for its average stone size. And at the point of completion, the revetment would be partially buried with the beach nourishment, and that beach nourishment material would be of a sand material with some gravel in that to mimic very closely what the existing beach materials are at this point in time. Our updated preliminary costs for each of these aspects is outlined above. We've also included a column that's talking about the benefit cost priority. So the most important aspect out of these sections of the design is the directionally drilled subsurface drainage line in order to improve that stability and redirect the subsurface redirect the subsurface water from the mid portion of the bluff to the base so that it doesn't continue to exacerbate bluff issues. The second most important aspect is the revetment and beach nourishment, which would prevent further erosion of the bottom of the bluff and thus prevent further crest recession as you progress further in time. The final aspect being the bluff excavation and pathway. Because of the substantial amount of excavation that would be required in order to create the pathway, this is the most expensive portion of the project. So in consideration of that, we wanted to provide the option as well to be very similar to South Beach. So at this point, the difference between the South Beach and the North Beach, besides how much people use it and what it's being used for, is the saturated silt and sand seam. So upon placing the directionally drilled subsurface drainage lines, the North Beach and the bluff system along there will behave very similar to the South Beach. So it is an option to forego a large portion of the grading of the bluff and only do a small amount of grading at the base in order to accommodate the position of the revetment. And that way, the cost of this project would be substantially reduced. However, there is the potential, just as with South Beach, that over time there will be bluff slides that make it access for pedestrians to be traversing across there more difficult, as well as not having the pedestrian path itself. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Questions? Mr. Sigwart.
Emily, will vegetation be part of the final design?
Yes, so right now we have it preliminarily proposed to be a specialty erosion control mix from Prairie Nursery in Westfield. It consists of deep-rooted vegetation, prairie grasses, wildflowers, and of course that mix can be further identified and refined in order to meet the aesthetics that are requested of this park.
Mr. Planer?
I forget, I apologize if we covered this in a previous visit from Miller, but Emily, how does it serve any functional purpose that traversing walkway, the excavation work is the critical piece of that, right? The pathway itself doesn't do anything functional, is that right?
Correct. The pathway itself is a minor amount of additional grading simply to add connectivity between the park and the beach. If it were just grading the bluff, it would be difficult in order to actually achieve grading the entirety of the bluff without creating a pathway for construction access to be traversing there, as well as we wouldn't be able to install the drainage lines to be intercepting the surface water. But the majority of the project and what is benefiting the bluff stability is first and foremost the directionally drilled subsurface lands.
Thank you.
Mr. Benning?
Emily, you had indicated that in that one next to last slide about going cheap, I guess that's my words. Yeah, if I looked at $1.1 million roughly, not including the hill work, what would this compare to? I mean, what are we talking half of that $1.1 million cost to do what you're proposing here?
So what we would be looking at is that we still have the $70,000, $600,000, and $350,000 for the construction aspect, as well as the periodic inspections. If the bluff excavation was limited to only removing the existing sliding material to have the revetment, I would expect that would be closer to the thousands of dollars. So I would expect that the cost would be closer to around $2 million.
Okay.
Mr. Benning?
No, go ahead, Roger. But go to the microphone.
You need to step to the microphone. Thank you.
And related to those last two questions, what we're planning on is that the final plans would include all of those points, but when it comes to the point of setting up bid documents, provided as an alternate, so that the decision need not be made until bid prices are in, and then you can select, not choosing that big part of the work. Because in the big picture, long term, the first three priority items, in this case, we don't have, our benefits are really intangible, so we didn't provide cost-benefit ratios or benefit-cost ratios, but we know those approximate costs. So in this case, our benefits are intangible, so those will be decisions that once the directionally drilled subsurface water is intercepted, we expect there will be no more risk of major sudden slides on the North Beach than you already will choose to live with and have lived with for years on the South. And there will be a widened beach. So there will be much of the safety and beach functional use. The primary then intangible would be you wouldn't have the pathway down, which is a part of the accessibility. And then, as Emily said, that pathway is the route to intercept some of the direct surface water drainage. But because that bluff work is such a big chunk, I think if you, in this case, if we were to roughly ballpark the intangibles, you could get about 80% of the result for about 20% of the cost. Which is an important decision to make at the time you see actual bids.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I guess, Rob, this is probably more for you. I know you've excluded the moving of the road, and I know we've talked, or we've heard at BPW that has to occur. Do we have an estimate on what it's going to take to move that road?
We do. I want to say that, yeah, we're looking at about 600 feet of road. I would estimate probably $400 a foot, so maybe $250,000 to move the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say on the high end.
And then, Emily, on North Beach, having the most amount of sand that we can is important to the citizens. And when we had the high water over the past few years, it was not usable. When you put the revetment in, how much, on average, and I know high water, low water affects all that, but on average, will there be any effect on the amount of sandy beach in that area?
The presence of the beach nourishment itself will add volume of that material, but over time, as that becomes redistributed across the beach, it'll be very similar in width of what you're seeing now. The revetment itself is taking up about 6 feet thickness of that space. So by the time that you add in a little bit of additional nourishment, there's not a significant loss in walkable area.
Mr. Tierney?
Question, Emily, and if I've asked this before and you answered it, I apologize. But when we talk about the nourishment and the vegetation particularly, we've had some attempts on some of our parks and everything where we've tried to do vegetation in parks, and it gets hammered by the weather. Have you had successes with this kind of thing? Because I think there's going to be a lot of water action and wave action on there, particularly during the winter. And if we're putting plants in and they're just getting wiped out every winter, that concerns me a little, because I understand why we want the vegetation, but I want to make sure the vegetation is going to make it.
Right, absolutely. And that's why we're specifying vegetation that has deep roots. So along the bluff face itself, those vegetation options, and those species will have deep enough roots that it's able to hold within the upper foot or so of the soil profile. So that helps immensely, especially on slopes, in order to be preventing erosion and loss of that vegetation. So it's not, mow grass that's only a couple of inches. It is fairly substantial. And we do have those drainage lines of the surface water that's helping intercept water as well.
And I think you're asking about establishing it where the waves crash. So
Okay,
Yeah.
and we won't be actually placing much material within the beach nourishment area
Right.
itself. There is, we do recommend placing marum grass, which is a native material that does help hold the sand. But over time, as water levels fluctuate, that'll be eroded away. And then as water levels drop back down, it'll repropagate. But marum grass is extremely resilient and is able to accommodate those different water levels down there.
So elaborating on that, for most beach nourishment projects that we've done over the last 20-some years for naturalization of municipal beaches, the nearshore area was shallow and flat enough so that the beach nourishment would have enough sand above the high water levels to retain at least some amount of the marum grass, so then it could repropagate when lake levels go back down. At this particular location, we haven't shown that in the plan because during high water levels, and we may, sometime in the future, we'll talk more about what you mentioned, working at the intergovernmental level. We may be having in the future higher water levels than we've historically had. So we haven't shown marum grass design in this, but it's not expensive to do at any time. So if the beach behaves well enough that it looks like at least some of it may stay, that can be done at any point in time.
Other questions?
Yes, could
Mr.
you
Newhart?
expand upon where the pipes come down that are bleeding off the water? How far back from the beach do they terminate, that they drain out?
Right, so I think the best image, at least for the directionally drilled pipe, which the surface drainage will be the same. Those pipes are going to be draining within the upper couple of feet of the revetment itself. So in addition to being at least 4 or so odd feet above the high water levels, it'll also be discharging within the stones of the revetment itself. So it'll be within that 5 feet thickness of the armor stone layer, it's going to be discharging in there. So it'll be protected that way and not discharging directly on the beach itself.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add a couple things. So first of all, I appreciate the native species piece for the plantings. We've had issues with property owners putting non-native invasive species on their properties to retain their hillsides. With the flamingos coming this summer, we would like some palm trees. So if we can find that, or even throw in a mangrove and we can expand our beach, that would be fantastic. But I do want to say that I'd ask the council, as we consider this moving forward, to be bold, because while there is a cost to have that bluff with the switchback put in there, if you've never been down to Shorewood and seen how they designed the access from Lake Drive down to the bluff, it transformed their community and made that lake fully accessible. I also appreciate the grading in there, because that would increase our ability to have multiple modalities get down to the bluff and support there. That's really important to me. So I think that's good money for us to consider. If and when this comes, though, Rob, I would ask that you and Roger work together when the recommendation comes to fund this, to then also bring to the council a 50-year plan. The day that this goes on, what does the next 50 years look like? And even if we can work with you all and an actuary to kind of see what that would be to fund, so that future councils demonstrate our stewardship value and have that on the radar. Last time we had this conversation, Alderman Sigwart said something that kind of got my attention, which is, once upon a time, somebody took a rubber hose and laid down what the road was going to look like. And, it was just kind of put together, and that, he was very frustrated by the fact that we were considering not doing this. And bluff stabilization on our north side, our most precious property that we have as a city is that park. And I just really appreciate that. And with that 50-year plan, whatever the maintenance would be, what Park and Rec should be putting in the budget for, species replacement. I don't know, I asked Mike, my engineer buddy over here, like, does the pipes have to get augered every 4 or 5 years? Like, what are the things that the city would be taking on as a responsibility for the further maintenance of this? But just the visual of being able to access the beach from the upper lake, it's difficult. There's constant calls for parking, et cetera, in Port Washington. So to have 3 access points to get down to North Beach, to me, that's really fantastic, and it increases that for us. And anybody who grew up here, and I know you tire of hearing this, but when I was 12, 11 years old, you could walk down from the bluff on multiple different trails right to the beach. And now, that's an exercise in danger. So I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate your plan as well.
Yeah.
All right. Rob, anything to close us out?
Yeah, I would just, I would add, at the risk of being overly optimistic, certainly keeping the path in the plan makes it more attractive for grant applications. And so while it's a big ask, I mean, I think it does, would make us score higher for any grant applications that we submit.
Well, and just the fact that we continually were using medieval terms like revetment tonight, that got my social studies teacher excited. Charge the revetments.
And yeah, the Atwater example is a terrific one. We used to live a couple blocks away from there, and we were there all the time going up and down the path, and they have stairs. It just, I think, activates the area and would really...
They've got that beautiful sculpture at the top.
Yes,
That's like the pinnacle of like, hey, this is where you get down. I mean, it's just...
Everybody loves the sculpture. It's called
I agree.
Spillover, if anyone cares.
Yeah, no, it's very cool sculpture. But I mean, we set a strategic target to be a premier community on the Great Lakes, and a few $1 million investment to make our beachfronts and our bluff premier. We gotta stick to what our vision was. So thank you for that, and I appreciate the bold plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? All right. With that, any other public comments or appearances before we head out? Raj, anything? All right. The last thing I would say then is I just wanted to publicly recognize, and I know the council will share this with me. I appreciate, Rob, if you could please tell the gentleman down at the streets and Mr. Hoyle, we appreciate the diligence this week. I had the pleasure of driving to Palmyra last night in Jefferson County, and I drove 16 miles on 2 inches of impacted ice, and thought I was going to have the front end of my car rip off. And I don't have that in my city, and I think our community is very fortunate that those guys, those crews got out there, they got to it, and that I even watched JD get out of his plow and help the mailman as he was stuck going up the hill. So it's that kind of service that I think people in our community need to recognize that we're very fortunate to have. So please share that. Okay, with that, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Go Pirates.